Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
Joe Karp is here, and as usual, we have him once a month, and I'm so glad that we're going to see him in person today.
Well, good morning. Here I am.
For years you used to come, and then
yeah, but then your office was in Delray Beach.
No, it was always in Boca.
Well,
but
it
it's
was
just
virtual.
north,
It was
right.
just you got off at Atlantic Avenue.
It's worth it. I just love Joe. Joe is so special in our life personally, as well as being someone that so many people have gone to see you. It's amazing. Every time I say that, I go to Joe Karp, really. But see, it's very personal. We're not allowed to talk about who your clients are, so I never know.
I'm not allowed to tell you. They can.
I know, but they do.
I even ask permission. Sometimes they'll say, somebody sent me, and I'll say, may I send them a thank you note for the referral? And they'll say, well, of course. They know I'm here. And I said, you don't understand. Even the fact that you came here is privileged, and it's your privilege, not mine. So I won't acknowledge it unless you say so.
Right. Now we're going to talk about something very special. Joe did a favor for me in his column coming up in our November issue. And that's because nowadays, years ago, if you were one of the children, you would tell someone you're going to be living with your friend, and they would go crazy. You can't live with someone if you're not married, right? But now the older folks are doing it too. And why is that?
Well, first of all, the younger generation has liberated the older generation. Secondly, the older generation is the former younger generation. I mean, the boomers started living together in the 1960s and 70s anyway. So now the boomers are 70. And if you happen to be even an 88-year-old or a 92-year-old, what you've discovered is you came to terms with the fact that your daughter was living with a guy, your granddaughter's been living with a guy, your daughter living with the guy maybe lived with 3 of them and didn't get 3 divorces while other people got divorces. And you say, not a bad idea. The mores and values have changed. And then with older people, they start to say, marriage is very complicating. It's legal entitlements and entailments, and it just gets crazy. And they want to know, well, I don't want to have to go to a lawyer and do a prenuptial agreement. And if it doesn't work out, and they see enough of the problems. And also, candidly, frequently it doesn't work out at the end when somebody becomes disabled and impaired. The 88-year-old girlfriend doesn't want the responsibility of her 92-year-old boyfriend, but if they were the husband and wife, they would. The children of the 92-year-old say, she can't take care of my father. The children of the 88-year-old say, he's not your husband. He's not dad. You can't take care of him. His kids are pointing him off on you. And the whole thing gets to be a myriad of problems, both physically, emotionally, and, of course, financially. So they finally say, you know what? If it's good enough for the kids, it's good enough for us. Let's just live together. We're not going to make babies. We're not going to do any of that other generational taking care of. So let's live together. But what's happened to a lot of people is they started living together when they became widowed or divorced in their 70s, and they didn't think they'd have the long run that they're having. So that's what's going on, and it's amazing to me even to see this generational change. And the other reason they can do it is there's no longer a sense of embarrassment. The children can't know, the grandchildren can't know. And that whole issue of it would be a bad precedent to set. I mean, in 1960, if my grandmother had moved in with another guy after my grandfather died, there is no way she would have wanted my particularly their sexism that has been rampant, my 11-year-old female cousin to see that was okay. They might have accepted it for the men because we were always really bad. We were always immoral.
So how long have you actually been practicing law? Because I want to reflect on this.
I graduated law school in 1974.
Okay. So for you, you're very, very bright and very, you think about things even beyond what most lawyers do. You started seeing a trend, didn't you, that you thought, well, they're coming in here and they probably don't have the right documents, but what will happen if they keep living longer? Did you initiate this then with them yourself and say, why don't you think about this?
Well, first of all, if you recall, and for those of you who didn't listen last month or didn't read Boomer Times, last month we talked about married couples and the complications for second marriages, etc., and how to do your estate plan with regard to that. But on married couples, initially, no, I didn't. Initially, I didn't because I started out like every other traditional estate planner. So I said, so what happens when you die? He can live or she can live in my house for 1 year. And they would have some stuff with regard to that. Okay, we'll put that in the trust. We'll put that in your will, whatever it was. And I thought like everybody else. But as you know, in 1994, I switched my practice to elder law, not just estate planning. And I started dealing with the realities of what happens when you don't die. Because that's what elder law focuses in on first. We look at life before death. And I'd say, well, what provisions have you made for your significant other? And the person would say, well, when I die, she can stay in the house for the rest of her life. Or whatever it would be, she can stay in for the rest of her life. And I'd say, well, what if you don't die? This, what do you mean? I say, well, your power of attorney or your trust leaves your daughter in charge or your son in charge. There's no provision for your significant other to remain on the premises while you're there. There's no prohibition against selling the place. Because there would have been, had there been a marriage, there would have been a prenuptial agreement potentially, but there's also homestead rights for a spouse, so there's other issues. So I said, well, you got to start to address those issues. You got to define the rights between the parties and the obligations. And we may have to fine-tooth comb it. My significant other can stay in the house. Now, next question is, who pays what? Because your son or daughter, assume no malice. Assume they don't have an evil bone in their body. And they're not interested in money, right?
Well, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
But assume that for the minute. They say, well, my dad's girlfriend is living in the house. Dad is now in a nursing home, and
he needs the money.
He needs
sell
the money
house.
for, or he
Right.
needs the money, or even if we can afford to keep the house and not liquidate it, we can't spend his money on the HOA fees, the property tax, the electric bill. What's the deal? And these are difficult conversations. I'm going to give a plug to an establishment. I tell people when they're going to have this conversation, if it's not going to be harmonious, have a Starbucks conversation. Go to Starbucks, sit down, get a cup of coffee, a glass of tea, a bottle of water, or just sit there and have a civilized conversation about the complications. And you may need, if it's one person's property, they must put it in their documents. Now, remember this. If I put in my trust that my girlfriend is my wife, so it's a very convenient situation, but assume for the minute it wasn't my wife and I was in a relationship without the benefits of marriage. And I put in my trust, if I'm disabled, my girlfriend can live in my house and here are the ground rules, and the house cannot be sold by my son, who's the successor trustee, that's a good thing. Now, I get ticked off with my girlfriend. I can still amend the trust because we don't have a contract. And that's faith and trust and relationships. And who's going to pay what? But we put that in. Some people say, and it's the one whose house it isn't, says, it's this binding on him. I said, well, it's not irrevocable. His son or daughter can't amend it, but he can. So sometimes they actually get family law attorneys to draw up agreements, not that would provide for alimony or anything, but with regard to that, or sometimes they just trust each other and it's put in the document. And remember, frequently, the one person gave up their home. They were living in two separate places, and they've also made economic decisions based upon that. And I've seen it happen where somebody helped her son out. She helped her son out because she sold her place. I'm moving in with Max, and I can stay there when Max dies. And then all of a sudden, Max doesn't die, but he has a stroke and goes to the nursing home. And Max's daughter says, you can't stay there. We need the money. Or you can stay there, but you're going to have to pay all of these fees related to the place because we need his income and his life savings to support it. And all of a sudden, eyes pop out.
Joe, it is so complicated, just in what you've been saying. And I do want people, I know that November is going to be very good for you because you will not be, you're not going to be doing any seminars in December. But I have to tell you, the best deal going are the free senior survival workshops that Joe Karp does. So let me give you some ideas of where you can see and hear him or his associate. Tuesday, November the 15th from 1:30 to 4, Palm Beach Gardens Marriott. It's a most wonderful, wonderful opportunity. Doesn't cost any money. You get to meet Joe, but you will hear things just like we're talking about now. Wednesday, November the 16th from 1:30 to 4, Courtyard by Marriott in Boynton Beach. And then for those of you living up in the Jupiter area, you want to go up to Port St. Lucie, it's not so far for you. It's Thursday, November the 17th from 1:30 to 4. Now, if you want more information, get on their website because he has a splendid website. And that's karplaw.com, KARPLAW.com. And I'll give you their phone number if you have any other questions. And let me tell you about that. When you call, there's always someone there, except you call on the weekend. But they are so good. He's been doing this. He's very smart. He's been our lawyer, and I recommend him to all my friends and, of course, our people who read Boomer Times. It's 1-800-893-9911, 1-800-893-9911. I was just thinking as you were talking, and I just have to interject. I can't tell you how many people I know now who are having such problems. They're taking care of a father or a mother. They have brother and sister problems, and God forbid someone should want to live with the mother or father. And then now you may have a couple who've loved the mother, loved the father, and now they get divorced. Now they have a new wife, and the wife says, you mean there's your inheritance and you're letting this person do it? He doesn't even know who they are anymore, right?
Yeah, we run into these situations all the time.
No, you must.
And I had a couple in yesterday, and I had to point out that he said, well, when I die, second marriage, now of about 15, 16 years, and totally committed marriage, he said, well, when I die, I want my daughter to get $100,000. And she said, like, what about me? I'm going to need that money. And then it was, how can we ensure she will get something when the wife dies? And it gets complicated because, if you've got just so much on the plate, you've got to deal with it. And I said, well, had you come to me 15 years ago, I would have suggested that you spend a little bit of money when you were younger, healthier, to buy a life insurance policy on each of you so that each one of your kids is guaranteed something. Now, we came up with the deal with them because he realized when he heard it, he was not argumentative. He understood she was right. And he also knew what's good for the goose is good for the gander. He didn't want her leaving $100,000 to her daughter. They had a daughter apiece. I said, well, why don't you do this? You're both. And we talked about the fact that also people who make these deals, the verbal agreements, their attitudes change with time. They recognize that the reality is when his daughter calls up and she answers the phone, she says, hi, how are you? And the wife says, I'm fine, how are you? Let me put on your father. Okay?
Exactly, that's
the conversation. And it's not rude. She didn't talk to how are you was enough. Okay? And if she said, well, I've got, issues, she would show some concern, but that's not why she called.
I'm on my way out. Why don't you talk to your
But even if I'm not on my way, they know they want to chat.
Of course.
It's all about touching base with Dad. So I said, you realize whoever dies first, the other one's daughter is going to call up twice a year. Birthday and whatever holiday you all celebrate. And you're going to think, the only reason she called up is to see if I'm dead yet, to see if she's getting the money. And there's no closeness of the relationship. There's an understanding and there's positive stuff and they appreciate the relationship. But 13 years later, you're not going to want to leave her half the money when your daughter's been the one coming and changing your diapers and taking you to doctor's appointments. You're not going to want to do it.
You're so
we
smart,
talked about
Joe.
What can you do? Well, we can create a trust that will be lock it up and do all the deals. And I say, well, first of all, do either one of you want to account to either of your children for the rest of your lives when the first one dies? And it was no. So we ended up doing for these people, and again, these were people that didn't have substantial means. If you have substantial means, we can say, okay, out of the $3 million, $1 million is going to be held in trust for the surviving spouse who will only get the income. And when that spouse dies, the decedent's kid or the two kids will get the 50-50 of the principal because you got enough to live. But what do you do when there's not that? One, sometimes it's just the crapshoot. You just got to deal with the real world. Now, what these people had, though, is they had about $900,000, of which about $450,000, half of their money, was actually IRA money. IRA money between the two of them. And we're doing an IRA contract, and a contract is a binding instrument. And we're going to not keep shackles on them. So the contract's going to say they both agree to leave their IRAs to each other, and they both agree when they are the holder of the IRAs from both, they're going to make the two children the beneficiaries of the IRA equally. Now, we're not going to restrict them to the required minimum distributions, the RMDs. They need the money. They can take out whatever they need. But they recognize with the IRA, it's a little trickier instrument because, they're going to sign duplicate copies and give their daughters the agreement. So it's an enforceable contract. And the reason is, when you take money out of an IRA, it's income taxable. So you're not going to be crazy and start yanking out that $500,000 and pay 39% income tax on it so you can screw your significant other or your spouse's daughter.
Well, I want to stop you here, Joe, because wait a minute. Because this is something, a specific thing. I want to be more generic on what you're doing because I think that, and what I want to say to people is, because Joe is really so smart and he does understand so many things. No matter what the instance is, you're going to find a little bit way. And that's why I want you to explain this.
It's figuring it out. It's sort of like Dr. Mencia is saying, wait a minute, you can't have, fruit is terrific for you, but don't eat so much. So what we do is sit down and try to analyze the situation. We say, this is your reality. And I sat there with this husband and wife and said, you can't do this. Your spouse, either one of you need the money. And you give common sense answers. And then I said, now, you two have to work it out, or you're each going to need separate lawyers, and you're going to have to deal with reality.
That's what you said, separate lawyers. That's very good. But let me ask you just it's kind of a strange question, but when people have been now living together, older people, what do they call each other? Some people say it's their fiance and they're not getting married. What are you finding that they're saying? They just use the word significant other?
No, they rarely use significant other.
What do they say? They say fiance.
The best line I heard was, "This is true." I mean, I've heard significant other. I've heard my partner, or this is the person I'm living with. A woman came in about 3 weeks ago and introduced the man she's living with, and she said, "He's my spousal substitute."
Oh no, my spousal substitute. Oh, that's terrible.
So, and well, it's a new world. It's just a new world. But they generally just, this is Phil, this is Sarah. They just go by names, and they.
But haven't you heard the fiance thing that they just don't get married?
No, I'm
really?
not hearing.
I've heard that.
They're not going through that charade with me. They aren't, because fiance indicates they really intend to get married, and when they're coming to me, they're telling me they don't intend to get married. They intend to live together.
Okay, so now, have you had some same-sex couples? That's a whole different thing coming up, right?
I've had same-sex couples, both married and unmarried. And the interesting thing is, and this is something because of the number of same-sex couples that are women is far more striking than you would have thought, because there's stereotypes in the world. And the stereotypes are that gay men are effeminate and gay women are butchy. And I have lots of women clients who are significantly othered or married now, who are clearly not at all butch. And they're just regular women who happen to have a separate sexual preference. And
or
the
just
other
friendship,
thing,
a lot of that.
No, but they want to be with another.
I understand that.
I mean, marriage, your relationship with your husband is a friendship as well as a sexual preference.
The same thing. It's true.
Yes, so the answer is, but what I'm finding is that and I'm learning, all of the stereotypes are out. And people are starting to learn it, and it's very enjoyable. For example, in my marriage, I'm the husband, Debbie's the wife, but that really is labels, because she hates going to the supermarket. She would rather, do whatever than be in the supermarket. I like it. It's mindless and entertaining. So if you were to play the stereotype, I have the wife role.
Right.
And what we're discovering, and I'm learning, is there is no, in gay relationships, there's no who's the husband, who's the wife. It's really a shared relationship, and one person may or may not be more dominant in certain areas, but there's not the she's the guy and he's the she's the woman,
You're
or
really
he's the wife and he's the husband. No, and in a heterosexual relationship, we have the labels, but my son's one of his best friends. He's home taking care of the kid.
Sure.
And his wife doesn't.
Because we're going to run out of time. It might be a good thing to talk about something like this, that there are now very different roles that people play. And so where the husband winds up in the nursing home and then the wife has to take care of it, it's now reversed. You have this one going there and the husband's there. And is he now going to be, the wife has Alzheimer's, so is he allowed to have a lover on the side? I mean, and we don't have more time, but think about this.
I will give you the one other thing. You asked me, what do the older couples who are living together call each other? The interesting thing is gay couples who are married have difficulty defining how they'll refer to each other. Two men will say my spouse. Some will say both
Husband
will say
or-
my husband. Two women will say my spouse. Some will say
My wife.
my wife. They'll both say my wife. But a lot of them are still clinging to my partner because that is the term
I
of
see.
comfort of long term.
But Joe,
Come to
thank
the
you.
workshops.
Thank you,
We'll
thank
be
you.
doing
Right.
it. You'll learn a lot.
You will. And the number to call to just check on everything is 800-893-9911. And
Can
we
I
love
add one
having
more
you.
thing?
I don't think we have any time.
Well, I'll just say I've had people come to my office 2 weeks ago that came to me 10 years ago at the workshop and said, we're ready now. So if you're not ready, come
Ready now.
anyway because you'll learn.
Right, you will. Thanks, Joe.